Assalamu alaikum. I've been involved in the Palestine-Israel debate for the better part of the last 40 years. Unfortunately, it has not been an easy ride. The Palestinian cause, or the Palestinian dream, not only dream, right, for self-determination, for equality, for justice, to be treated as normal human beings, have not advanced 1 inch. There are many reasons for that. Number one, and number two are not the problem. Number one is Israel. Number two is the rise of Islamic fundamentalism. The biggest problem has been the sheer hypocrisy of Western media, of Western leaders, of Western elites. The sheer hypocrisy where an Israeli life is worth 50 to 100 times a Palestinian life. Because if you go back over the last few decades, or a couple of decades, and look at the ratio of Palestinian civilian deaths to Israeli civilian deaths, that is a ratio. You don't believe me? Look at the United Nations reporting on civilian death or on death in the, let's call it, Israel-Palestine conflict, as if there is two equal sides to this conflict. 6,500 Palestinian dead, 250 Israelis. The vast majority of Palestinian dead are civilian. The vast majority of Israeli dead are military. This is the first time ever for the, I shouldn't say ever, this is the last time in many decades, over 7 decades, that Israeli civilians have been killed in large number. First time in 7 decades. Yet every decade, many thousand Palestinian civilians are killed by Israel, and the international community is absent. Our leaders are absent. Our leaders in Canada, I'm a Canadian, the leaders of the United States, the European leaders are absent. Sometimes we hear them pay lip service. As of now, far more Palestinian civilian in the latest confederate, whatever you want to call it, war, I guess, has been killed by Israeli Air Force, dropping 1,000-pound bomb into the most densely packed area of the world. Those who are basically those who are outraged, expressing simply, where are they right now? Look, I don't like what Hamas did. I think they did commit war crimes. I think it is exaggerated because many of the people who were killed and identified as civilians on the Israeli side were actually combatant. Because in Israel, between the age of 18 and to the age of 45 male, and between the age of 18 to 40 female, they're part of the reserve, and all of them have weapons. But evidence, however, coming out that many got killed and were not combatant. And this will qualify as a war crime. So, if that's a war crime, why, when Israel kills thousands of Palestinian civilians, that's not a war crime? Right now, We're under the threat that the Palestinian population is going to be starved, deprived of water, deprived of medicine, deprived of all essentials of life. An Israeli invasion of Gaza will likely cause tens of thousands of Palestinian lives. Gazans cannot escape. Israel will not let them into Israel, which is ironic because 70% of the population of Gaza are refugees from more than 70%, by the way, are refugees from what's now Israel. Their parents and their grandparents were in villages and towns across the fence that Israel called borders. That's what Israel is. Israel was built on Palestinian land. Israel was built on the dispossession of Palestinians from their homeland. It may not make what Hamas did right, but it sure explains it. Look what Israel is doing right now. Hamas killed a tiny fraction of what Israel did. And they want to go and wipe out Gaza. They want to flatten it. They wanna. As a matter of fact, was it not that the Egyptian basically said, no, you're not. They wanted the whole population of Gaza to move to Egypt. That's the only escape path they gave them. Go to Egypt. Why? So to do upon the Palestinian in Gaza what the Israelis did to the Palestinian before, make them into refugees so they can take the land without the people. People should really study the history of Palestine and study how the Zionist movement expelled the vast majority of Palestinians and they took over the land. Even those Palestinians that were successful in staying. People in Canada don't know this. There is a Canadian connection. And the Canadian connection is there is an officer in the Canadian Army who Jewish volunteered, and he was the commander of the Jewish forces in Nazares. He received an order to expel the Palestinians. He refused. He refused, and after they couldn't anymore state that, oh, the Palestinian basically, quote unquote, left because of the fighting or left because of their own accord. This is where the vast majority of Palestinian population is in the Galilee, because thanks, if you want to call it thanks, but thanks to that Canadian Jewish officer who said, no, I'm not going to expel the population out. They had nothing to do with anything. In the rest of Palestine, the vast majority of the population was expelled. This is even documented in Rabin diaries, where Ben Gurion himself, yes, the father of the state of Israel, okay, ordered the expulsion of the population of Lod and Ramle. It's shameful, okay, that we basically still continue to blame Palestinians. Nobody in the world cares about what the crimes, the massive crime that Israel does. Nobody cares. We care about the crime of Hamas. Or if the PLO in the past killed a dozen of Israeli, or half a dozen of Israeli, or one Israeli, or two Israeli, all of this I don't like. But when thousands of Palestinians get slaughtered, nobody cares. When thousands of Lebanese get slaughtered, nobody cared. When tens of thousands of Egyptian civilians were slaughtered, nobody cared. And the West talk about morality. Our leaders talk about we want to spread democracy, human rights, and freedoms, and except when it comes to Palestinians. We'll give you a little bit of money to survive, but if you try to fight for any of your right, eh, the argument is, how do we deal with Hamas? Hamas does not accept. There has been a lot of feelers came out of Hamas, an indication that they would accept a two-state solution. You know something? I don't know that 100%. Feelers are feelers. Palestinian leaders say that. Independently, Palestinian leaders say that. Okay, I can take them, you know, on their word, or I can say, I don't know. Hamas is a radical organization. Da da da. Okay. What about the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank? What about Abu Mazen? The Israeli humiliated continuously, day by day, they humiliate him. Day by day, they undercut his authority, even though he cooperated with the Israelis on almost every level in order, between quotation mark, to keep the peace in the West Bank. Israeli settlers keep expanding in the West Bank illegally. Under international law, it's illegal. People have to understand settlement in the West Bank and in Jerusalem are illegal under international law. Illegal. That's not me saying. That's the International Court of Justice. This is the highest legal authority in the world saying that they are illegal, that these are occupied territories. What do our leaders do? Pay lip service. Worse than pay lip service. Let's talk about, I'll give you an example in my country, Canada. Okay? And that applied to almost every country in the Western Hemisphere. Canadians go and volunteer. Same thing with Americans, same thing with Germans, same thing with French, same thing with English. They volunteered in the Israeli army and they go serve in the occupied territories, oppressing Palestinians. These are Canadian citizens. These are American citizens. Imagine for 1 second, imagine if the Canadian government or the US government would be silent, for example, if, let's say, for example, a Syrian does that, a Turkey does that. Of course they won't. You won't. That's not even another thing. A Canadian, okay, or an American or the British, or not only can they do it, okay, they go and live in the occupied territories in illegal settlement, harass Palestinians. These are violating international law. These are participants in a crime. Does Canada do anything? No, no, nothing. Does the US do anything? No, nothing. Forget about that. It even gets worse. Canadians are funding the occupations of Palestine. There are many Canadians, okay, are funding the building of settlements in the West Bank. Again, illegal under international law. But in Canada, the JNF has been caught red-handed. doing things anyone would go in jail for in Canada. The JNF built Canada Park. Canada Park, and that's one of the few things they did. In 1967, Israel conquered the West Bank. They destroyed part of what they destroyed. Okay, two villages in the West Bank. Who covered up the crime? Tax deductible money from Canada. They built something called Canada Park over the home of Palestinians who were thrown out of those two villages. Imagine this happen anywhere else. So the sheer hypocrisy, it's outstanding. It's not hypocrisy, it's degeneracy. It's a moral degeneracy. I know that might be a strong word, but it doesn't even come to describe it. We have here two sets of values. We place low value on a certain group of people and high value on another. 50 Palestinian life for one Israeli life. What the Israelis want far is taking into consideration far more than what the Palestinian want. Even though the Palestinian is morally correct and the Israeli is not. Does that make Hamas right? No. No, it doesn't. Yes, let's go back to the peace process. Who destroyed the peace process? The peace process was destroyed by two parties, if you want to call it. Let's say three. I don't want to include here the international community and its soft treatment of Israel. Okay, let's talk about three in the region. You have the Israeli right. Part of it is a religious right. These were the one I call the party of God. Okay, or to be more exact, Christopher Hitchin, I coined that term, the parties of God. So the parties of God on the Israeli side, but you can add to it the ultra-nationalists. Many of them don't believe in a God, but they would argue that God gave them the land, even though they don't believe in God. Figure that out. I can't. Why? Because they are maximalists. They believe God gave them the land. Somehow, a Jew coming out from Kiev or Warsaw or whatever, have more, or Vancouver, Brooklyn have more right to the land than a Palestinian. I mean, this is obscene. This is utterly obscene. Yet, okay. The other side is, quote unquote, the centrist Israeli governments or centrist Israeli political parties and leaders. In order to pressure the Palestinians into concession, they enacted a series of policies that made the life of Palestinians in the West Bank a living hell. All of a sudden, it became almost impossible from zone A to Z, between two towns in zone A's. Literally almost impossible, making their life an absolute living hell. So when at the beginning of the process, the vast majority of Palestinians supported the peace process, these policies that made the life of Palestinian a living hell, okay, substantially reduced the support to the peace process. Yet they were still majority at that point supported it. It went from a vast majority, close to 80% plus, to small majority. On the Israeli side, it never went beyond a small majority. We go to Hamas. Actually, before we go to Hamas, all what the Israeli government needed to be is to have a little bit of empathy. The Palestinians were willing to accept 22% of their homeland back. Israel get to keep 78% of the Palestinian homeland. No, they wanted to share that 22% with the Palestinian. The Israeli view, we're not negotiating about the 78%, we're negotiating on the 22%, and how are we going to divide the 22%? Also, the Israeli wanted the Palestinian to annul the right of return. How can the PLO annul anything? The right of return is inherent right. It's an individual right. The PLO, what the PLO said is, we want fight for the right of return, but we cannot annul it. This is for future generation to figure out. Yes, the Palestinian hope that in a generation, 2 generation, 3 generation, 4 generation, at least the PLO and some of the intellectual in the Palestinian community, after hatred received, that Palestinians may well be allowed, or some Palestinian may well be allowed, to Lod al-Ramle in Jaffa and other town where they were expelled. Okay. Now we move to Hamas. What did Hamas do? They engaged in bombings. Every time there was a hope that perhaps there might be an agreement, or we're close to one, a bomb goes out in Israel, killing civilians. Yeah, it killed 2, 3, 4 Israelis. Okay? And it killed the dream of Palestinians to have their own state. And now what we have in Israel? We have a fascist government. Fascist. Anybody that does not recognize this government that they have in Israel and the people they have in it as fascist is blind. Netanyahu, who is an extreme right-wing demagogue, who himself qualifies as a fascist, is a moderate in the current Israeli climate. Palestinians in the West Bank, Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, have done almost everything Israel wants them to do, except an utter surrender. Again, yet Israeli government keep humiliating them. If they cannot make a peace with the Palestinian Authority, why do you think they can make peace with anybody? There are many other topics that I want to go through, but probably this is not the time for this video. I know I'm not the most exciting person on the internet, But let's listen to what I say, not how I say it. Listen to the words. Take your mental blocks away, whether you are a Hamas supporter or whether you're an Israeli supporter. Take your mental blocks away and think about what I said and go and do the research. And you will see that everything I said is correct. If I made a mistake, please tell me where I made the mistake. I'm open to correcting them. Peace is difficult. Peace requires brave people. It's far braver to be a person of peace than to be a person of war. Because to be a person of peace, to have empathy to the other side, at many times you get pushed out of your community. Why? Because you're supposed to be close-minded. You're supposed to basically repeat the party line, no matter how dumb it is. You're supposed to repeat the party line. If you wonder why humanity has been at war with itself for almost forever, it is because we're ruled by cowards. And because we let our mental block that we developed when we were young, or because of our fear and because of our hate, to prevent us from going forward. I'm not talking only about the Israelis or the pro-Israeli camp. They do have their mental blocks, and I don't talk to them about them only. I talk also about people who come out in support of Hamas as if Hamas is more important than the Palestinian people. Hey, the same thing with the other side. Israel had become more important than the Jewish people themselves. People have sold their morality on both sides on the altar of the golden calf. On the Palestinian side, Hamas became that golden calf. On the Jewish side, it is Israel that's the golden calf. Anybody that believes in a Jewish state or an Islamic state is by their very nature immoral, because they are negating everybody else who is not like them. I thought we decide in a place like Canada and United States that we're beyond these primitive impulses. But obviously we're not, because we have many of our politicians, they worship at the altar of the golden calf. We have many of our people worship at the altar of the golden calf. There will not be peace till we decide to treat each other as equal human beings. That's a message for everybody. That's a message for Palestinians. That's a message for Israelis. That's a message for those who purport to support Palestinian Israelis. The vast majority of people here who support the Palestinian cause believe in equality, believe in justice. Yes, there are those lunatic people who support the party of God. Okay? And the pro-Israeli side, unfortunately, the majority of those who support Israel do not do not believe in those principles, which is really, really sad. They talk it, and then you tell them, are you willing to allow the Palestinian to return to their homes? No, it should not be. It is God promised million excuse. They'd be danger to Israel. Da da da. Okay, under which conditions are you willing to allow the Palestinian back? And they're silent because under no condition they are willing to allow it. A story I will tell you. The late Aziz Kaki, he was the head of the Committee for Racial Justice. God bless his soul. I hope there is heaven because I don't think any person is more deserving of heaven than the late Aziz Kaki. He was the head of the Committee for Racial Justice. I was on the Committee for Racial Justice representing the Canadian Arab Federation. And there was a lawyer by the name of Marvin Starr who represented the Canadian Jewish Congress. Aziz wanted me and Marvin to talk, to have a conversation. Marvin Stark, if people don't know who's Marvin Stark, was a very well-known lawyer, the late Marvin Stark. Again, I do hope there is heaven because I'm sure he will be going to heaven. I may get, you know, uh, uh, criticism from those that believe that the only way you're going to go to heaven if you're a Muslim, or you're the only way you're going to be in heaven if you get baptized. That's their problem. Okay, not mine. Okay. He was a human rights lawyer, and he fought fought, I would say, strongly for Native Canadian, the Native population right. Okay. So Aziz Kaki, God rest his soul, he encouraged us to talk. He knew both of us, and he basically encouraged us to talk. At the beginning, there were a lot of blocks, mental blocks on both sides. And it primarily has to do with fear of the other, fear of what the other may do. I think we developed some friendship. I hope he would have considered me as a friend. I surely considered him as a friend and a great man. I may not agree with everything he believe in. I'm sure he does not agree with everything I believe in either. But after several meetings, we could arrive in the common denominator. People can arrive at common denominators, but they have to be brave, not cowards. We came up, but that's many, many years ago, with a formula. That may have worked. At that time, I don't know if it's feasible anymore, to tell you the truth, after what, 20 something year. So, Palestinian state in the West Bank, Gaza, share Jerusalem. Palestinian will get compensation for the part of Jerusalem they will concede. a land bridge between the West Bank and Gaza, and progressive right of return. What does progressive right of return mean? Every year, we couldn't agree on the number, to be fair. Okay. My view that the 50,000 is the minimum that Palestinians will agree to put this topic behind them, and 50,000 a year, to be more exact. He states that perhaps 25,000 is the maximum that the Israeli may be willing to stomach. I don't think that the Israelis would stomach 25,000, but nonetheless, that's at least the number he gave. So if two people like me and him, who are steeped in defending their respective, let's call it causes, can come to an agreement, why not? But if you allow the maximalists to take over our lives, the cowardice of our leaders, whether are in the West, especially in the West, because at the end of the day, United States and Europe decide that's what's going to be there's going to be a solution, and these are the parameters. Everybody will do it, but they are cowards, and they're cowards. I think everybody know why they're cowards, because they're faced in Canada, in the United States, okay, with combination of there is a pro-Israeli lobby, right or wrong, and then there is the party, the Christian Party of God, who somehow they want to bring Armageddon. They think that Israel is a precursor of Armageddon, and they basically that's their job. The Christian, and yes, there is a huge reservoir of Christian, white Christian guilt because of the Holocaust and because of the tremendous atrocities that was committed against Jews in Europe. Anyway, I think I bored you enough. Uh, thank you very much. If you stayed till the end of the video, thank you very much for bearing with me. And I hope to see you in another video. I'm going to keep the comment section on, so, write whatever you want, but please be polite. Please don't insult people. And please try to make sense. Quoting from a holy book or saying God gave us this, or God is going to basically help us liberate this, is not an argument. It's not a reasoned argument. Have respect for your own mind, okay, and yourself, and actually put a little bit of analysis before you write something. Thank you very much. Take care.